Congressman Adam Kinzinger taking time out of his busy day. Congressman, good morning to you.
Hey, my man, what's going on? How are you?
How you doing this morning?
Oh, you know what? It's just as beautiful in Channahon, Illinois as Rockford. I got to spend the day up in Rockford yesterday and kind of the middle part of the district today, so it's going to be awesome.
Nice. You've got beautiful district traveling weather. You took part in a National Night Out as well, right?
Yeah, I went to the one down here in Minooka, Illinois, which is where I live. And, yeah, but they're cool. And I was talking to, Ogle Sheriff yesterday, too, when I was at the fair, just, talking about, hey, what do you, are these things beneficial? And he goes, yeah, they're awesome because there are so many people that don't know their neighbors anymore.
Right.
And it's just an opportunity to do that. I realize, look, even in my own neighborhood here, it's kind of, there's people that move in and out sometimes, but I don't know all my neighbors. And, it's because people just, you come home, you sit inside, and so it's kind of a good opportunity to counter that trend.
I think back when I was a kid, yeah, we knew all the neighbors. A lot of times you had keys to the neighbors' houses because when they were gone, of course, you would go and get the paper for them, get their mail, put it up, check water plants. I mean, everybody kind of knew everybody, and boy, that really has kind of fallen by the wayside in many communities.
So, okay, as we get into the gun talk, I want to lead with this, too, because I think this is kind of an important point.
Okay.
Which is Americans feel more and more isolated right now. People feel they're angry and they're miserable. I mean, the cortisol levels just flow through people's bodies, basically, once they wake up in the morning, which shortens your lifespan. And this idea, so kids are becoming isolated on social media, right? All they do is they hop on Twitter, they shout out into this internet abyss. They do this stuff on Facebook, they do it on Instagram, and this is part of it, the fact that we don't know our neighbors, we don't go outside, we don't see people, and humans need connection, and they're feeling so disconnected right now.
That's an excellent, excellent point, especially the younger you are. Maybe when you're older and you've had enough interaction with human beings and you want to cocoon a little bit, that's one thing. But boy, to start out the young and developmental part of your life that way, that's no way to go about things.
I've seen it. I've seen it in people I know. I've seen it in folks, I'm related to, this kind of isolation that overtakes people. Look, here's the reality. And, I've talked about a couple of tweaks we can make to guns that I think can actually ameliorate some of these issues, but, still protect our Second Amendment rights. But here's the biggest point that gets missed in everything, because if you ever talk about anything like a change to a law, that becomes the big headline. The biggest point I made, for instance, in an article I wrote about what I think we can do is one thing, that there is real evil in the world. There is demonic, satanic forces that are whispering into the ears of our children, that are teaching them violence. They're watching this violence on video games. And I'm not against violent video games. I just think parents need to be aware of what they do and what they're showing kids and what they're training kids to be able to do. And, kids are sitting here with this kind of stuff going on. And at the end of the day, when you are taught that there's no God, you're taught that there's no afterlife, you basically by then accept that there's no hope, because when life is miserable, there's no reason for your misery. And that's when 99.9% of kids won't go and do mass shootings. But that's when the 0.1% of kids will be tempted and whispered into doing it. And it's something we're not talking about because it offends people to talk about God. But I get more offended by people acting like God is not part of the solution to this. It doesn't have to be the Protestant God, I believe. It can be a Catholic God. It can be any God, but a God that values life.
Yeah, and the nihilist attitude is not going to get us anything but trouble. And so much of that comes down. Nothing matters. Nothing matters in the long run. There's nothing after this. They're morals are just something some old guys wrote down on a piece of paper one time. I don't have to subscribe to that. That's when you get into some of the serious deep water that we're talking about. And the piece that you mentioned, United Against Hate, how we can sensibly address gun violence. One of the things that you bring up, and I'm certain that you got a little blowback on it, raise the age to 21 to purchase a firearm.
Yeah. It's funny. So I want to address this on all levels on that.
Sure.
So if I make mention of anything, there's going to be some on our side of the aisle that say any move is the beginning of the slippery slope to banning weapons, and they're angry. And then there's always going to be people on the other side that say nothing is never enough. Hence why nothing's been done. I guarantee you most people don't know that you have to be 21 years old to buy a handgun.
Right.
That was a decision made in the 80s. Now, they left long guns as a state decision about 18 because at the time that included mainly just shotguns. And I have no problem with shotguns, the state setting up a program for those to stay under 21. But we as a nation, have embraced 21 as kind of this age when your brain is fully, developmentally abled. We've done that with alcohol, now with cigarettes, and I disagree with the reasoning behind raising, those to that level. However, when it comes to firearms, it seems to me a mismatch that a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old or 19-year-old cannot buy a handgun, but they can buy an AR. And while I'm for keeping ARs legal, I own an AR. The reality is, should an 18-year-old that cannot buy a 6-shot handgun be able to buy an AR? And yes, I get that, as a Second Amendment advocate myself, I would much rather, in a perfect world, have it to where 18-year-olds can buy any gun they want, basically, within reason. The problem is we don't live in a perfect world.
Nope.
We live in a world where an 18-year-old kid with a grudge against his classmates, and it happens, more often than we'd ever like to see, or somebody that gets expelled, or somebody just out of high school or somebody goes to a garlic festival, legally buys an AR-15, and shoots up a bunch of people. Now, I want to keep these guns legal because, like I said, I like to shoot them, and 99.999 repeating percent of firearm owners do it in the right way.
Yep.
But if we can ameliorate, people coming out of high school with a grudge and legally buying these, why wouldn't we do it? It really has not been a huge violation of everybody's constitutional rights to say 21 to buy a handgun. We still are the most free country. This is a real little thing that I think can make a difference.
Yep, and, like I said, I read your piece. Actually, I read it over 3 times to make sure I knew exactly where you were coming from and what you were saying about it. I thought to myself, there's some good common sense in here that will irritate the hell out of both sides, so that might mean that you're actually striking a vein of or something right down the middle that maybe we should look at. Because, as you mentioned, there are some people that any sort of additional restriction on top of the gun laws that we already have, that's the slippery slope. The next thing we have is we're going to try some confiscation. Which you and I both know, the idea of that will take us down a road nobody wants to go down.
And that's right. And I'll tell you, if we don't address the things that I think we can all address that can make somewhat of a difference, that will be. If you think that the young generation, the people under the age of 30, who I happen to know pretty well because I run into them all the time and I'm somewhat close to their age, if anybody thinks that generation is going to be the next pro-Second Amendment generation on the track we're currently on, you're wrong. If you want to maintain your Second Amendment rights, it's not about getting angry and resisting every move to make any difference. There's already restrictions on firearms, so it's not like this has never happened. But that generation, without us coming to the table and saying, how do we both maintain our Second Amendment rights and recognize that this is both a problem with certain people having access that shouldn't, and it's also a problem with the spiritual side of this whole thing, we're going to lose that generation, and we're going to lose our Second Amendment rights when I'm too old to be in Congress, and that next generation is in charge because they have no sympathy right now for it.
Yep, and you talk about spiritual, and then there's the whole mental health aspect that is, really quickly glossed over before we go right to the guns themselves.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, that's the whole thing, is I think both sides in this are right and wrong, okay? And I think on our side, on the pro-Second Amendment side, we're absolutely right on the importance of access to firearms. I think we're wrong in not having legitimate conversations about where we can tweak that to ensure that there's people that are opposing red flag laws right now. That's a losing position. I think red flag laws are going to happen, and they're right. On the other side, there's people that don't want to address any spiritual or mental health issue. It is always a jump to access to guns. And I could ban every gun in the United States of America, and it's not going to reduce gun violence. I mean, it's not going to stop gun violence. It may reduce part of it. It's not going to stop it because it's an issue of the heart. Both sides have a point, and it happens. We just stay in our corner, and we are unwilling to have a conversation, and the cortisol flows through our body. We get stressed and angry and shorten our life, and that's not because of a gun. It's because we're just sitting around angry and unwilling to talk to our neighbors.
Right, and all it takes is a scroll through your timeline on Twitter, which I did this morning, and I was introduced rapidly to about 500 people I never even want to be in the same room with, let alone have a discussion with.
The best thing I ever did was I quit looking at Twitter, and, I'll approve tweets that go out from my account, but I realized that there are people that, frankly, have no right to outsize voice in any of our heads. And just because they figured out how to use Twitter and use all all capital letters.
Yeah.
It doesn't give them any more right than any other constituent.
No, but it's like you. It gives me the right to go, no, I'm done. I'm not going to pay attention to your stuff anymore. Just too hot. Just too hot.
Yeah,
Congressman,
exactly.
I know how busy you are. I appreciate you taking time. I invite everybody to read what it is you wrote, which is United Against Hate, How We Can Sensibly Address Gun Violence. If you Google the Congressman and you put that down, you will be led to Medium.com and other places that feature that editorial op-ed, whatever you want to call it. It's just his thoughts, and I thought they were very well composed, and I appreciate you coming on to talk about them.
Hey, thanks. And let me just say this. It's fine if you disagree with me, but at least read the article. Don't go based off the headlines. I see too many people just reading the headline and jumping off.